Kia ora whānau. We're going to kick off the final session before the wrap-up and before we break for lunch. So the next session is just a very conversational styled opportunity for me to introduce you to the incredible Rebecca McPhee, who's an award-winning journalist, and our mutual friend Sarah Corson. I was just about to say she's from the Painga Project in Auckland. She's actually from here. She's not from there. She just happens to be working there. So we stole her back to share with us and talk to us today. I'm going to ask Rebecca and Sarah to introduce themselves to you, and then I'm just going to have a chat to them about what they're up to and what they're seeing and hearing in the work that they do.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Is that working? Ko tangata tiriti ahau. E noho ana ahau ki Otatahi. Torotukau tau. He kaituitui ahau. Tēnā koutou ki tau pōwhiri e tēnei rā. Ki te harikoa ahau ki Tairāwhiti. Ira? Ira? Maybe? Ko Rebecca McPhee ahau. Apologies for my staggering, halting, unpolished, out of my depth today, but I've learned that it's my staggering, halting journey to become vaguely competent at the most basic levels of te reo it is not about the kupu probably so much for me. It's been about the window it's enabled me to move through, to know how to open up my mind and heart as a Pākehā, to be in a community like this, to be in a community like Papakura where Sarah does her work, to be in a community like Aranui where I spent a long time last year in the Rangatahi Court, which Judge Taimonu was speaking of. I'm a journalist. I guess I'm also late in life on a long journey of what it means to be able to contribute constructively as tangata tiriti through my specific work. I'm a journalist and that's all I know what to do, and I try to some extent, I guess the thing that I might be able to be useful at is to try and translate from communities that are doing incredible, innovative, creative work out into the kind of communities that I'm from, which are essentially somewhat decent communities of privileged people who are mostly Pākehā and are somewhat sorted, to quote the Prime Minister. So that's what I've been doing, and Leslyn has very kindly put up the two little books, one of which is a collection of my journalism, and the other is a book that I co-edited. So my book, we'll go on to that, but that is enough of an introduction from me at the moment.
Kia ora te whānau, ko Sarah Takawengoa no te Tairāwhiti ahau. Thank you for making it clear that I am not an Aucklander. This is my home. I lead an organisation called Painga Project. We're a charity based in Papakura in South Auckland, and our main mahi, our focus is equity at the school gate for primary and intermediate school students in the highest equity index schools. So we know we have 614 of the schools in the country. We work in 98 of them. We work in 53 of them in Auckland. We've got 98 to complete. But our mahi is free glasses, so hearing and vision screening, and then free glasses and whatever hearing support is required for a child to fully engage in their educational journey. So we're well established in Auckland. We're just starting in Wellington with whānau Manaaki in preschool, doing 16 kindergartens to see what the difference in eye and ear health is down there. And we're hoping to be able to be down here next year in some form and begin screening in the schools that are a priority for you guys.
Thanks, Sarah. I mean, it's really exciting, the work that both of you are doing, and we're grateful that you're here to be in our community. And I thank you both for the interest that you've shown in the work that we've done here in Manaaki Tairāwhiti. I want to thank you, Rebecca, for writing a chapter in your book about hardship and hope, about the work that we've been doing here. It's good to stimulate conversations outside of our own community. When I asked you both whether you'd be interested in sharing your kōrero with our audience here today, I think the thing that both of you have in common from where I sit is you are working in spaces where people are not waiting for the government to come in on a white horse and save us all. You are working in communities where whānau are standing up for themselves, and citizens, people are taking ownership of, we're here now, it's not perfect. What are we going to do about it? So more community initiatives where people are just getting on with it. And I wanted to invite you to share from your perspectives what that looks like in other communities, what you've seen when you've travelled and when you've talked to people. So we'll go to you first, Rebecca.
Yeah, thanks, Leslyn. This book, which I called Hardship and Hope, Stories of Resistance in the Fight Against Poverty in Aotearoa, there were kind of a few phases to how I got to that framing. Leslyn mentioned the word cynicism before, and cynicism as against the word hope, and those two words have become incredibly important for me as kind of po for how I can maybe do something useful as a journalist in what I consider to be really an existential crisis for this country, with deep tap roots, which most Pākehā New Zealand still don't understand. So I struggled for a long time, what could I do that was useful, and I ended up landing on the idea of grassroots action, not really knowing what I would find. And the technical term for this particular piece of journalistic skill is, other people would call it scoping or literature reviews or whatever. We call it asking around. So I asked around, and you read around, and somehow or other, for instance, both of these women beside me, who I'm proud to call my friends, my relationship with them came about through this highly technical method of asking around. And the same occurred in other communities. So there are 6 stories, I call them 6 chapters in this book. They're a kind of a subset of a bigger body of work, some of which appeared in The Listener and some of which appeared only online, including Toitu Tairāwhiti Housing, which is where I've had a brief interaction with the amazing Willie Te Aho, who I was fortunate to meet in person just this morning. I think I didn't know what I was doing when I set out on this, and I would add that I still don't know what I'm doing. When I've worked on this project, which I've been on really for nearly 4 years, I have been completely and utterly out of my depth. And the task really for me has been to be in places, whether it's with Leslyn and the Manaaki Tairāwhiti crew, or being in Papakura with Sarah and her crew, or being with the Southern Initiative crew with the amazing Ngāti Porou woman Angie Tangaire, who's from up the coast, or Pakapapa's from up the coast, is simply to try and enter this community with an open heart, knowing that this is not my world, trying to do what in journalism we've never done before, which is to share with people who I am and share the fact that I'm not of this world. I mean, I'm a middle-class Pākehā who grew up on a farm in South Otago, and is the beneficiary of privileges that I know full well that the men from up the coast here in C Company were specifically and deliberately excluded from. My father was a returned serviceman, so I grew up on a farm that he got as a result of his work service. What I've found as I've gone around the place is incredible diversity of communities who will not sit down and accept that it is okay for children to be dying of third world diseases in this country, who will not accept that it is okay for there to be 24,000 people on the social housing waiting list, or there to be over 100,000 people literally homeless in this country, who will not accept that when they discover that kids can't see and hear properly, that we'll just try and write some letters to see if we might get something done about this, but in fact have the phenomenal skill and innovation to make connections, try things. The audacity really, I think, of both these two women here are amazing to me, but I also have learned that it is not unusual. There are some, so I could take you through the different stories, but, you know, grab the book and have a read. I hope people like you who are working on the ground will find something in there, if it's not your story, but you'll be able to identify with people who are working in the way that you are working. My goal really has been to try and use, for these stories to be able to be a method of translation of struggle and hardship and capacity and productivity from communities that are living with poverty and struggle out into communities like the one that I live in that have no idea, and to help them to understand the historical taproots and to help them to understand that we have the capacity and the skill and the answer to make change, and for us not to do so is truly unforgivable.
I think for us, it's exactly, well, not exactly, Rebecca, but very similar to what you said, is when we formed Paenga Project, we went to school principals in Papakura. There's about 7 main schools in Papakura, and we said, what do you need? And they sort of looked at me, it's very strangely, because it was like, well, no one ever asks us what they need. Everyone comes in and tells us what they're going to do for us. Then they do a project, they spend their funding, and then that's it. That's the end of the project, and we let down our children. So really the Hearing and Vision project and other bits and pieces we did, providing transport in schools and having minibuses and providing togs or swimming lessons, really came from asking that question and digging around and finding out what people needed and what would suit each individual school. So, you know, as I mentioned, we've got 53 schools, and each of them, they've all got their own little, I call them their own little planets, and they've got their own little planets of talent, and the way they orbit is all very different. And so sitting here today, having the privilege of listening to you guys speak, and it's everything that we can't achieve in Papakura, but everything that you guys are doing as a region that's extraordinary. Yeah.
Thank you both. I think what's important is for us to recognise that there's bright spots of innovation that are happening all over the place, and we get very focused on our work, and we live in a small, isolated community, and sometimes it's really good for us all to look up take a breath and hear some other people's good stories as well, and know that other people are out there giving it a go. We're not reliant on each other, but when we share our connections and our experiences with each other, we can help inspire each other to keep going, because it can get very heavy and sometimes it gets very lonely in work where it's hard to see the result. When you just walk down the street, or, sometimes it's hard to see that the impact that we believe is possible and the impact that we're trying to make. It's not always right there in front of us, but that doesn't mean that we should give up hope. And I love where the inspiration came for you using hope in your book. Do you want to just tell us a quick bit about that? And then I think we might be handing over to Judy for a wrap-up before lunch.
Yeah, I landed on the word hope thinking this was a kind of a doorway for me to walk through to attempt this kind of work, which felt very risky, and including the fact that I felt I would go into communities like Gisborne, like Papakura, and feel that I had no business as a person of privilege being there. But I was working with this idea of hope as an active noun and an active verb. But what did that mean? And then I've always, bizarrely as a journalist, I've never been a cynic. I'm not actually a cynical person. I think a lot of people think journalists are cynical, but I find cynicism a deadening state of mind. And I was working away at this, trying to figure out how hope could take me somewhere that wasn't just kind of cheesy good news stories that made, that looked cute and, might just as well be on 7 o'clock news, as a kind of 5-minute outro to a dark news night. I wanted it to be a radical word, actually. And I haven't got the book here in my hand, otherwise I'd read you Rebecca Solnit's quote. But if any of you are familiar with the work of Rebecca Solnit, who's an American journalist and essayist, I came upon a piece of writing that she had done, and it was relating to climate change, which I've also done a lot of writing and work about. And she frames hope not as something cosy that you sit on the sofa and feel good and feeling good about the future and yourself. She says hope is an axe that you take to break down the walls with in an emergency. She says that cynicism is the opposite of hope. Cynicism leads to, as you said, Leslyn, passivity. It leads to the feeling that nothing can be done, we are stuck with this. And I think in both the climate space and in deep poverty and disadvantage, which I came to see as parallel existential crises, really, this is true. Hope means that you are not a cynic. It is the opposite of cynicism. The powerful want you to be cynical. They want you to not fight. They want you to accept the status quo. To hope is to take action. And Solnit talks about hope as being a decision to act in whatever way you can to be part of a future. And it became a kind of an anchor for me as personally, because this has been like an incredibly and life-changing piece of work for me. But I think for anybody who is taking action, whatever that might be, is deciding to participate in a better future within whatever capabilities and time and skill and resources that they've got. So there are two pathways: to act for change or to lie down. And I think everybody here is acting for change. You're acting in hope. Hope is the po.
Thank you. Well, I think you'll agree with me that that's a wonderful sentiment for us to finish our discussion with. I want to thank you so much for being here. And thank you for joining me and sharing your wisdoms, your insights with all of us today. And copies of your book are available.
They are. They will probably be in your
Muir's bookshop.
Your really good bookshop. Yeah.
Yes.
And you can get them on at bwb.co.nz.
bwb.co.nz to purchase copies of the book, or go to Muir's bookshop, or
the
Paper
library.
Plus, or the library. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Kia ora.